this story is a story that needs to be told because ऐसे कई गुमनाम नायक हैं जिनकी कुर्बानियों की कहानी हम तक पहुंचती ही नहीं है. The first emotion I felt was a certain level of ignorance and guilt because as a history student I didn't know about Usha Mehta. I was just like screaming and getting hit and lifting a flag and trying my best, but so much of it has to do with how it was presented.
Sara Ali Khan, welcome to The Hindu. I'll start with this. When you and your producer Karan Johar were presenting a look of Ae Watan Mere Watan at IFFI Goa, he called it a thoroughly Gen Z story, and he made a pertinent point that often we use the word Gen Z in a slightly condescending, slightly derogatory way, but they are a generation that's very much with their times. They have a keen sense of, you know, the politics of the world and the environment, things like that. Do you agree, and would you like to expand on that thought a bit more?
I definitely think so. I think that more than any of the words that you used, I think Gen Z has a slightly frivolous vibe, you know, when you say Gen Z very often. But I think that we are the youth of the country. And I think in a film like Ae Watan Mere Watan, what we've tried to do is very beautifully portray a young woman that was the epitome of strength and sacrifice and embodied what the youth of the country at that time was. You know, when you think of bravery, you think of kind of this physically strong masculine figure. But there can be emotional, mental fortitude that is needed, femininity that is needed in strength, which is what I think Usha Mehta embodies. And even today, maybe more than ever, the need to stand up for what we believe, you know, karo ya maro. Obviously, the stakes are different because, you know, Aajkal we're free, you know, we are a free democratic nation. So, of course, things like international subjugation, colonialism, do or die because otherwise you'll be hung, those stakes are different. But the need to have your own voice and the need to stand up for what you believe in is a timeless endeavor. And I think it stands the test of time even today and is probably even more relevant today than ever before.
We of course know the broad outline of Usha Mehta's life. You know, she was a student at Wilson College. She was 22 when she founded the Secret Congress Radio, which broadcasted anti-imperial news at a time when all alternative voices were subjugated by the British. You read history at Columbia during your college days. I wonder, when the script came to you, beyond the broad story, what more details spoke to you, the little minor things about a figure like this that spoke to you, you know, maybe at a personal level, about her life, how they went about, you know, putting this together?
Well, to answer your question, honestly, I think the first emotion I felt was a certain level of ignorance and guilt. Because as a history student, I didn't know about Usha Mehta. And that's when I transferred the academic guilt to the actor's kind of burden almost, because I said, we need to tell this story. This story is a story that needs to be told because ऐसे कई गुमनाम नायक हैं जिनकी कुर्बानियों की कहानी हम तक पहुंचती ही नहीं है. You know, so that was the first thing. But I also think that, like I said, I think Usha Mehta is a story of bravery, and it's one that you don't expect. I'm very proud to bring to the forefront a woman-based freedom struggle that is not about just physical strength. That is so much about the degree of which she had to sacrifice. Brahmachari, you hear about it, but to actually adopt a life of celibacy because you think कि देश प्रेम इतना ज़्यादा है that there's no other scope for any other kind of love or distraction in your life. That level of commitment, I think that it goes beyond just being an inspirational story of the freedom struggle. I think it's a story of commitment, sacrifice, endeavors, emotions that stands the test of time and is equally relevant today. So yeah, I definitely think that both as a history student and just as a woman, I think that this story echoed itself to me as a story that just needs to be told and told urgently.
One of the most defining moments in her life was also unfurling the tricolour at the August Kranti Maidan in the early days of our protest. Can you talk to us about shooting that scene? We see a glimpse of it in the trailer. It looks very inspiring, looks grand.
The Gwalior Maidan.
Yeah, the Gwalior Maidan scene.
So I mean, I'll tell you that as an actor, it was as difficult to shoot as it was rewarding to watch as a viewer for me, myself, because itni garmi thi. It was so hot and there were so many people, there was so much crowd, and you know, like, if I can be honest, sometimes when you're shooting something in isolation and you don't see it in the big picture context, it can feel very out of place. So for me, I was just like screaming and getting hit and lifting a flag and trying my best. But so much of it has to do with how it was presented. Because actually there are moments where it's just me, a green screen, somebody trying to hit me. And you know how actors are. You know, my actors were so loving almost. Tambe and Gaiko, you know, the people that were playing the policemen. They were so sweet. They were like, nahi, aapko marenge to zoor se lag jayegi. And I was like, but you can't be thinking that. So they were almost not even hitting me, and I'm trying my best to kind of lift this flag. But I think it all came together so beautifully when you watch it, that I just think that, I mean, if I can be honest, as a viewer, I am proud when I watch that shot. That like mom ne bola, unke rongte khade ho gaye. So I think that's a big deal. You know, for me, she's an actor, she's my mom. So on every level, I think it's a triumph for me.
I'm very fascinated. Did you guys have any access to, let's say, the real equipments they had? Are they preserved? Did you guys get to see that? Is that stuff around?
I mean, no, we had to make a radio, for instance. But it was inspired quite accurately, I would say. But it helped, you know, because honestly, I think that the geographical and the emotional landscape of that time was just so different. We can never imagine what it was like to be in a time where the advent of the radio was a new technology, where the idea of communication was a novel thought, where death penalty was an extremely palpable and real threat. So I think what actually helped was having the charkha, having the flag, having the radio, have at least some elements that you can be like, okay, fine, this is real. Because otherwise it was a very difficult kind of film to imagine and put yourself in those surroundings as accurately as possible was not easy.
Do you have a process in place of, let's say, evaluating your own work? Do you go back and watch, let's say, specific scenes to
Of course.
judge
I like to watch my work again. I think it's important to see what you did right, what you did wrong. I've always believed that I do what I do for the love of my audience. And when they say something, whether they like it, whether they don't like it, I think I received a lot of love for Atrangire. I received a lot of love for Zara Hatke. To go back and see what works, what they like, is always rewarding. But having said that, I think that as an actor, I'm beginning to realize more and more the importance of unlearning. So you see your work objectively if you can. You try to, you know, take what works, understand what doesn't. But I think what's more important is to kind of come to each set with a clean slate, because each director has their own processes and each character is different. I mean, Bambi Todi from Murder Mubarak and Usha Mehta from Ae Watan Mere Watan don't have anything in common at all. Being able to, you know, get into the skin of both these characters, which with equal conviction on different sets at the same time can be tricky. So I think unlearning and surrendering to the director are the two go-tos that need to be implemented at all points of time.
It makes me think, you know, especially with period films, when you're doing period dramas, one pitfall we see filmmakers or even actors fall into is that often they start mimicking the mannerisms we saw in movies of that era, because their sort of understanding of that time is often informed by that. Is that something you and your director Kanan Iyer were conscious of trying to avoid, and making it, you know, making the performance and also the world building very contemporary in that sense, in terms of film grammar, in terms of acting?
See, I'll tell you something. As far as Usha Mehta specifically is concerned, we didn't have much footage about her. And I tried to watch no films of 1940s. I think what was very important, which is something that you began your interview with talking to me about. Firstly, this is a story inspired by Usha Mehta. Secondly, it's an ode to all the unsung heroes of the Indian national struggle. So it's not just about one story, as much as it's about the amount of sacrifice, that the amount of people made that we don't even know about, and the subtle and various forms that these sacrifices took. And after that, it's an endeavor to inspire and educate to a certain degree the youth of today. So it's not just a period film. It's a film whose emotions can resonate with our audiences even today. Therefore, it was important to not be nuclear in our approach, to not study only Usha Mehta, or to not, for instance, I was like, should I have a Gujarati dialect, because she was Gujarati. And Kanan sir was very sure that इससे बहुत दूर जाना है. We want to use this character as, it's not a biography. This character needs to inspire the whole country in the language of the whole country, which is Hindi.
Right, right, right.
So yeah.
It's also in a way a Sobo story, like of a Sobo that we didn't know, right? Like
It is.
It's, right, in a
and
way.
we did shoot there.
Yeah.
And it was amazing, I think, to be shooting on like Hanuman Circle,
Right, yeah.
to be shooting in these trams.
Right.
I think what really, really helped the film a lot was the production design of the film. Because like I said, the tropes that we're dealing with, pre-independence, colonialism, anti-imperialism, death penalty, celibacy, freedom, these are such big concepts that in order to root them into reality, we needed the radio, we needed the trams, we needed Gandhiji. I needed to be de-glamorized, I needed a khadi sari, I needed a side parting with those waves, I needed that bindi here. All those things really helped make the world seem more true, I feel.
So last time we spoke, you were reading Madame Bovary, Flaubert's novel.
When did we talk?
Yeah,
Atrangi?
this was around, no, Gaslight, I think. You're in the hills. You're traveling in the hills and you told me you're reading.
But we were on the phone.
You were on the phone?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I was shooting, in fact, Murder Mubarak
Oh,
at that time.
Madame Mubarak was being shot at that time. Did you finish the book? Did you like the book?
Yes, I did.
Right.
I loved the book.
Yeah.
I'm now reading a book called Sophie's World.
Yes.
Which is just amazing. I think I read it before also. But it's just so amazing to revisit it there because little bits of different philosophy all woven in like a fiction versus non-fiction setting. It's a beautiful book. I thoroughly recommend it.
Right. How often, do you read on the Kindle? Do you read paperback?
No, I like to read because matlab book pe,
Paperbacks, हाँ.
क्योंकि pen pencil markings होती हैं.
Right.
So recently, in fact, I was going to Jamnagar and it was really funny because me and my father were the only two people on the flight with our books and our pencils, and my brother was like, of course, wore his headphones and went to sleep. So,
he's also a strictly paperback person. Like, I've never seen him with a Kindle audiobooks.
We like to annotate, I think.
You do? Huh.
Yeah.
Would you do, let's say, an Indian adaptation of Madame Bovary, like in a modern context, like a story like that? It's such a I don't know, it's such a beautiful but also a dark, fascinating
Even Anna
story.
Karenina,
Yeah.
for instance. There's so many of these Russian, specifically,
Yeah.
so much Russian literature that I would love to. Seagull by Anton Chekhov.
Yeah.
So much that I would like to do.
Any other title you think would make a great adaptation?
I mean, these are three that I've just named you,
Huh.
but I think as a country, we have so many stories of our own to be able to tell. You know, Ae Watan Mere Watan is just one of the few of the unsung heroes of the Indian freedom struggle. Just if you go to the treasury of all the Indian heritage stories that we would have from so many eras, I don't think there's any way. I mean, from Chandragupta Maurya to Akbar to Indian freedom struggle to Indira Gandhi, there's so much.
And so many female heroes who you don't see movies on.
Yeah.
Right. I'll end with this. I'll just build on a point that you made earlier as well. I find it ironic, like, you know, when we read about the freedom struggle in India, so much of that energy was sustained by the youth of the country who came to the streets, who took to the streets. Today there's a cynicism, especially in the older generation, who say that students or children should not involve themselves closely with political issues, with environmental issues. Not just in India, it's a thing worldwide. Do you think that has to change, and you know, the youth needs to have a voice and often dissent, and that's just a part of democracy and their right to express themselves as our ancestors did back in the day?
See, I definitely think so. I definitely think that we're very lucky to live in a country where freedom of speech is encouraged and is a right that is given to us. So I think standing up for what you believe in, not just politically, even socially, environmentally, in your workplace, boon boon se banta sagar, you know. What I love also about Usha Mehta is that she realized that as a woman, maybe the amount of contribution she would have would be very different to what somebody else's contribution would be. So to just try to move whatever you do by a millimeter, I as an actor, for instance, doing a film like this was a risk for me. I am backing myself, my self-belief by doing a film like this. So I'm using that just an example to say back yourself, use your voice in whatever field you are in, and stand up for yourself. As a woman, as an Indian, there's no other way, I feel.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Sara.
Thank you.
Thank you.